Welcome to What Happens Next, the channel dedicated to have more nuanced conversations about change, particularly in our 50s, 60s and beyond. My name's Chris Daems. I'm a chartered financial planner, but at my heart, I just think I'm really curious. And I'm curious about the change that we go through when we've built a business, we've built a career, and we're thinking about the next chapter of our lives. But it's not always that easy because often, and I'll use my business as an example, business isn't only about business, it's also about family. And often that makes the transition from the life we've got now to the life that we're moving into really difficult. And I'm really pleased to have Raymond join me today to talk about the great stuff about family businesses and the combination of business and family, and the not so great stuff. Ray, how are you today, mate?
I'm all right, Chris. Thank you very much for having me. It's really cool to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Now, we've known each other for years now, but for the benefit of our audience, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, yeah, I think. Well, the easy bit is that I'm a trained finance man. I'm an accountant of many years, though I am not an accountant. Really, I'm a creative. I'm an artist. I've always enjoyed scribbling, drawing, anything that requires anything. I like numbers, and I enjoy people much more. I just happen to be told as an 18-year-old you can be a maths teacher or an accountant, and chose to be an accountant. Do not ask me why. But yeah, I'm married 28 years this year to Luann, and we got 2 teenage boys. So family's a big part for me. Yeah. And 11 years ago and 1 month, I stepped away from the corporate world to start doing something for myself, and as I would say, do it for us rather than with us. Yeah. But still going strong today. Maybe not quite in the same way as it was 11 years ago.
Yeah, interesting. You know what? It's funny enough, we were doing a bit of work yesterday, Ruth Hughes and I, on the course we're building for What Happens Next at the minute. And one of the conversations we had when we were building the course is that it's like multiple versions of ourselves, particularly when we move into the next chapter of our lives. Because actually, even though I'm a financial planner and you're an accountant, there's so many, it's like a multiverse of dimensions to our lives.
Yeah.
Like, when you think about that, is that evolved over time, and are you more comfortable talking about these multi-dimensions of your life now compared to them?
Yeah, I think they've always been. I think it's one of those things which over the last couple of years has been really clear, is that they've always been there. But I think more and more, especially over the last couple of years, been more and more comfortable with who I am and what matters to me. And I think whereas for a long time on the kind of career path, the treadmill, what does success look like in terms of what was around me, and in some really high net worth environments, where I think stepping away from that, but more so I think over the last 2 or 3 years, it's become more about, I know what I enjoy.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I'm probably actually, the thing which I think is a big difference now to what it used to be is I actually think I care less about what other people think about what I want. But I also think that also comes from the fact that my wife is very much a case of, at the end of the day, is what matters most for you, right? And for us, not who cares. I think the way I've described it is, I said this a couple of times this week to a few people, is we talk about what we want, and my wife would turn around and say we're millionaires because we've got 2 healthy, young, really nice young boys. And it's just, and that is kind of the perspective that we have, rather than, well, we need to have a 6-bedroom house in the middle of Pimlico or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I always go back to that gratitude element, because actually, if you're healthy, loving family, we live in a country that, despite all the moaning, you've got plenty of opportunity. You've won the lottery of life there, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? It's just all of that is the foundation for everything else you want to do, really.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So, what was the biggest transition for you when you left corporate life? What were the bits that you enjoyed about going and doing your own thing the most, and what were the big challenges?
Well, I really enjoyed being able to pick what I did with my time, only to realise that maybe I don't have the degree of structure that is actually necessary to work for myself or build something for myself. I think that's one of the big things that's real change, is that just used to having all that structure around you, and then not having that structure around me was just a big thing. I think also two other things I think are, I thought I understood business, having been a CFO in some really nice big brands and some nice big companies. Probably found out what business is really like for most people outside of big business. And I think the one that for us as a family was, we talked about what it would be like when I left and what life would be like and how it would kind of play out. And we planned for it. In no way, shape or form did we plan well enough.
Okay, that's interesting. What do you think? What were the gaps in hindsight?
Just how hard it was going to be to get started from the beginning, and how long it would take, and how much investment, not just financially, but in terms of time and energy, it would require from us rather than just me. And I think when I first left corporate life, I think I looked at a lot of this through the lens of what I was going to do, because I was going to do it for us anyway, rather than and how much pressure that put on and how much weight I carried with that, whether I intended it that way or not. But then to find out that actually some of the conversations we had were not deep enough, I think is probably the way, and actually not as joined up as much as they are completely different today.
Well, I mean, and like part of it is you don't know what you don't know, right? You know,
yes.
Part of it is just that element of turning around and going, like, unless you're living. I mean, I think, I mean, we're 16 years in now, but I think the first couple of years, I almost gave up 8 or 9 times because I thought, do you know what I mean? And it was the weird stuff for me. It was that stuff where you go, where's my IT department? It was me. Who's doing the invoicing? It was me, and it's all like. And then again, you do outsource and you build your team and you do all that sort of stuff.
Oh.
But start, it is a bit of a culture shock, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It is that element where it's all on you. And I know a lot of I know a lot of the work you do now is with family businesses, and in particular entrepreneurial couples who work together, like Cassie and I, and stuff like that. You know, where you've got those competing elements of family, you've got business, you've got personal finances, you've got all that sort of stuff. What was the moment when you thought, you know what, I really like this work, and this is the work I want to do?
Well, I've always, even if you go back to my corporate days, a lot of the conversations I was having even back then with partners or directors I was working with were very personal conversations and the context of business in their personal circumstances. But I think I came out not quite with that, as that wasn't what I had in mind when I left Odgers. It was very much more a case of I'm going to coach and I'm going to financial coach really more than anything else. But I think there was one couple I spoke to about 3 years in, and the owner today would consider it to be marriage saving business advice. At the time was how he described it, but it was more a case of when his wife turned around and said to him, I ride the roller coaster that you ride, I just ride it behind you. I feel everything you feel just after you. I can see everything that's coming after you've experienced it. And I just want to know if you're okay, because I know I can see that you're not, but you're not talking about what's happening. Yeah. And I think on that day, I think that was the start. Well, actually, it was a change. It was one of the pivotal things for me. One, it was this change in what I was doing at the time. But day. It was kind of like, this is where I feel most comfortable. I feel really comfortable in this conversation.
Add the most value.
Yeah. And I think that from there, and then from there, a number of experience, after that, a lot of challenges for us in terms of what I had been building, what stress it had put on us as a marriage, and what that had done to our finances. And then what that actually meant, I changed in terms of the business. So it was all kind of coming together. And then, as you know, I lost my dad 5 years ago. That then, I think, was the kind of point that I went, you know what? There is just life. There is just experiences. They're the bits that matter. Family is so important. And during that, there was a period during that where I was also my dad's carer, trying to build a business. We had COVID. We had all sorts of things going on at the same time. So coming out of that was kind of then, actually, this is really me, right? This is the final straw where you kind of go, actually, the universe tends to whisper, talk, shout, and then punch you on the nose until you get the message. Well, I think that was the gut punch that then made me go, actually, I think this is who I am. This is where I add the most value and what I really enjoy.
I think it's really interesting because we said it's a lot. I mean, we've talked about what we're grateful for, but one of the things that I'm massively grateful for is working with clients who are that 10 years, 15 years in front of me. Because you look at that and you go, and these are people who have had successful careers and built themselves businesses, and they've done. And again, we'll have that conversation about what success looks like, because I always find that really interesting. And then they get to a stage where they go, well, what actually matters? And often it goes back to time with people you love and like. It often goes back to shared experiences. It also it goes back to meaningful work. That can be part of the mix. And maybe I'd suggest that, but for the majority of us, knowing we're getting up in the morning and doing meaningful work should be. But often when people are thinking about that looks differently to what they're doing at the minute. And it's really interesting because I'm really grateful for having those conversations with clients, because it just frames my own life in a different way. So I was over seeing my dad yesterday, and my dad's 78 now, and he said, I haven't seen him because I've been busy with work and busy with life for 3 weeks, and he said to me, I said, "How you doing, mate?" And he went, I've just been a bit low recently because he's not going out as much. And I was like, oh shit, that part of that, because he only comes out when me and Ruts take him out. So it's like, right, I need to now make, learning those lessons, I need to make more of an effort. But sometimes you just need those reminders, don't you, of sort of that element of going, but yeah, it's so interesting because actually, the element of family, for me, family is really important to me. But sometimes the business stuff takes prominence, and I need to remind myself that the reason that I'm doing it is because of this reason. So yeah, it's really, really interesting, and actually, I think we underestimate the impact of family in our family business. So for people who are listening to this, who have run businesses and potentially family businesses for years, what factors do we underestimate, and how can we get better at thinking about family business?
Just how invested our families are in the success of what we do. And I think the more that we are more our families are engaged in what we create, right? The more invested they feel. And that's not necessarily about, I think this is where we get ourselves into a bit of a pickle. It's not about necessarily in terms of what we're doing in our business. It's not even necessarily what business we are even trying to build. Knowing what this engine is going to drive and associating what we're building as the engine to what we are wanting to do as a family is a massive, massive connecting point. So I've got plenty of clients who go, my wife is not interested in what I do. I said, in what context is she not interested? As in, she's not worried about whether you're an IT consultant or a marketing expert. I'm sure she's not. In terms of, are you happy, enjoying yourself, fulfilled, and is it moving you collectively forward? Absolutely. I'm absolutely sure she's interested. Yes, she is interested in that.
Well, we all want our businesses to be drivers to achieve the goals we want in life, right? That's the idea.
But we all want everybody who's involved in our lives to actually want to be involved in our business and want us to want to know everything about. Half the time they're not. It's like, you know what? Right now, is it doing what you want it to do? Is it doing? Are you okay? Are you happy? Is it? We're going on holiday in 3 weeks' time. You are going to step away from the business for 3 weeks while we go on holiday, right? Yes, that's what. And I think one of my clients had a conversation with. Beginning of last year with his wife, and his wife was like, I just want my husband to have some time back, because right now the time with us is not of a quantity, but certainly not of a quality. And I just remember my client looking at his wife like, I said, it's not about the money. It's never been about the money. The money, we understand the financials, right? All the three of us we understand it's what matters most is I want to be able to see my husband on the weekend. I want him to come home and sit down and have dinner with us.
Yeah,
that's what matters,
right?
Yes, without distract. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think, I mean, the way that we approach individuals' financial plans, and I get that it's not always easy, right? Because and I'm probably guilty of that distraction as well. But I think the starting point's got to be, what life do you want, and how does all of the other elements of your life help you achieve that element, including your business. But there is an additional challenge, I think, Ray, that we often ignore, and it's about identity and ego and who I am without the work. And it's really interesting. I don't know if I told you the story before, but I had a client, and I wrote that in the book. I had a client who ran a big construction business. He's still a client who ran a big construction business, and for about 4 years, he said to me, "You need to tell me I've got enough, because I need to make some changes." And the first time he saw me, he already had enough. And every year, he used to come back and he used to go, "Steve, you've still got enough. You're telling me you're not happy. What are you going to do about it?" And every year we go, "I'll think about it and I'll come back to you next year." And I was like, "Okay." And then I think we got to year 3 or 4, and he came in and I went, "What am I missing? There's something that I don't understand. That's this barrier." And he looked at me and went, "Who am I without that? Who am I without that identity? Who am I? I'm just a retired bloke, right? I'm just some bloke who's going on to this next ratio." It's really curious in terms of that. But how do we answer that question? And from your perspective, working with business owners who are potentially going through that transition, how do we handle that shift from status, ego, importance, MD of a business, to whatever happens next?
So one thing I would say where most of my clients have been concerned is it has been a major family or personal shift that has triggered or got them thinking and actually changing around this. Right. Yeah. So, and it has usually been, so I can say from my own perspective, when my dad passed away, the thing for me was, given I'd been my dad's carer for years, right, and that was what I knew, and that was really, I could have gone on for years doing that, right? Whether no matter how hard it got, that was part of my identity, right? And that was one bit that I found really hard to actually, who am I if I'm not that?
Yeah.
What I've also found with my clients is it has been a major family situation that has got them to have a think about, well, actually, if this has happened, so sick child, sick wife, usually not them that it impacts. It's around it's around them that's impacted. And then they look at the business, they look at life differently, they look at the business differently. And then what if I'm working all the way I am, and I've missed this, then what does that mean? Because I don't want to miss the signs of something. So I think it's been typically something majorly personal that has actually ended up with resulting in the shift.
Well, what did you learn about your dad not being well and then passing away?
I remember I was asked the question, one thing you learned from your dad that was really good and one thing that was that held you back. One thing was my dad was a trooper, right? Went through it, and I realised that's one thing I did learn, that I could, one thing was I never asked for help. And that was exactly right. My dad never asked for help, or I was the help. I think also it was because I'd done it for such a long time, and it hadn't felt like duty. I think that was the other bit. It felt like it was it just felt natural to me to do it. I also therefore realised that I had a propensity to step in for those I love and care about, to a point that I could be in the deep end of the pool without a rubber ring and without and maybe not able to swim sometimes. So I think that was it just kind of made me made me realise who I am as a person and what I value and who I value, but also that's really important, and that's not. And I suppose the way I'd say is, it's not for everybody, and it's not for me to give to everybody. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean that in a kind of being a little bit more circumspect about who I offer that to.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're absolutely spot on. When and we've had it sort of, Cassie and I have had it in our lives recently, because Cassie's dad's not been well. And it certainly shifts your perspective on, how we spend that time, what's important, what matters. I think certainly, if this is the first time you've listened to What Happens Next, welcome to the show. We are committed to making sure that we do as much as we can to help you navigate whatever's next in your life. And there's a home for What Happens Next, whathappensnext.life. We'd love for you to visit the site. On it, you will see loads of interviews, a link to take the What Happens Next quiz, an opportunity to sign up to the waiting list for the book, and much, much more. Take a look on the visit site, and we'd love to know what you think. From a philosophical background, remembering that one day we're not going to be here is worth reminding ourselves of, because it does inform our choices. And I think that's really interesting, because, are you making your decisions based on the fact that you've got this arbitrary goal to achieve? And I'm guilty of doing that as well. I'm not saying I'm perfect to that. Or are you making decisions based on the fact that, your sort of, your time might be best somewhere else? It was funny. I've said to Sophie, who's 14, my youngest, right, come on, jump in the car. We're going to go and see Grandad last night. So we jumped in the car, and it's where we are in Leon's seat. My dad's, it took about 50 minutes. So I let her DJ, right? So she's the DJ, and she loves she loves David Bowie, and she loves like the Oasis and Blur. So because
Wow.
now Spotify is available to all kids, they can listen to music
Yeah.
so anyway, on the way back, I said, well, why don't we listen to an album? Like, just not like Spotify, where we just like, let's go old school, Soph, and listen to an album, right? And she picked, and bless her, I know she's like pandering to me. Do you remember the Spin Doctors? Do you remember this?
Really?
Yeah, she picked the Spin. I was like, I love that album. But the thing is that I've come from that car, but then it's a bonding experience that I wouldn't have if I wouldn't have like, and it's that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Although it is going to cost me some money because we did talk about getting a vinyl record player and setting up.
Wow.
But yeah, but as a bonding experience, it was definitely worth doing, and it was a real interesting one. Now, one of the things that I think is fascinating, and I'm in a couple very similar to this, is the relationship between a couple when they're both in the business. Because you might have
Yes.
one partner who's the business builder and they're thinking about sort of transitioning out. You might have one member of the couple who's better with the operations. But then in my experience of working with clients, that can then change when the business isn't there anymore. So when you're thinking about that shift you need to make in the next chapter, how do you manage that so that you're in a position where you can successfully continue as a couple into the next chapter of your life?
Well, I'm working with one client at the moment who started out as just him, and his wife wasn't involved in the business. About 8 years ago, to a point where for the last 4 years they've worked together, and his wife has been effectively the operations director and basically run everything, and he's been more sales and marketing. I think what they've done really well is they've had really clear. The hardest part has been actually having a conversation early on, was having a conversation that wasn't overly emotive at the beginning, because obviously we got two very different perspectives in the room. What his wife is looking to move out, and what we've been doing is surrounding her with the best people so that she can then actually move away. And actually, sits there much more in a, or looking to sit in a much more advisory space. So in the sense that she's not looking to be in the day to day. So it's been interesting, but it's moving it. But for that to happen, you have to have the structure and the infrastructure in place. But you also have to have, I think you have to have clear roles. Loanne and I work slightly differently. We have agreed that Loanne will not work in the business, because experience says that when she did work in the business, it didn't work. However, the role as a fellow director of the business, she is the arbiter of what works, of what's working for us. But that has gone through a multitude of pain to go from working together to actually what's the best roles for both of us, which is, I'll run the business, build the business. I will always seek. My wife can ask any question she wants whenever she wants. It's her prerogative, right? She's my wife, and she's a director of the business. She can ask even if it's the most inane question that I ever think of asking. That's just how it is, and I'm happy with that. But I'm also more so happy that when it comes to the business, just having somebody there who is much more the outside of the day-to-day, able to look at it and go, actually, does it work for us? Does it give us what and have a conversation in that way? And actually, to be fair to most of my clients, their wives have been, whilst they started out working in the business, you then get to a place where the conversation about, you've almost got the business person and the family person connected in conversation. So it doesn't mean that one only cares about one side or the other, but you've almost got the connectivity of the two halves. It's just that one person has a slightly more family personal perspective, and the other one, because they're in the business, which is typically more often not the husband, has a more business. This is what is actually happening. I think, but it has taken. I think it takes time, but I think also all of us have been through it. I think you just don't want it to be as painful as it is to actually get to that place. I think we've all gone through places where one of my clients borrowed money from his father and didn't tell his wife he'd borrowed money, to then finding out, to crashing and burning businesses, to using all family savings, to doing all those things to then get to that place. I think the key is not to have to go through all that. Although sometimes you can tell a kid that the kettle's hot, but they still need to touch it to know.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a couple of themes there that really fascinate him. I don't know if it was the same with your dad, but I was really surprised when my dad yesterday said he was feeling a bit low, because he's from a generation that aren't as good. And I actually think that I'm 48, you're 50. 54. Actually, like that generation, like our dads, didn't particularly. There was like, it's on my shoulders. I'm the in my family, I'm the breadwinner. I'll go out and do what I need to do, and stuff like that. I think when I see it work really well, the bit that works really well is just open and honest communication. It's that element where you turn around and go, number one, I need help, as you said, and I need my wife, my partner's support to get there. But also when stuff's going wrong, just being able to turn around and go, look, how do we deal with it collectively? Because it's going to have an impact on you too. And I think I think there's a line between actually like sort of taking action and then thinking about like and doing this sort of stuff. But certainly my dad and probably your dad wouldn't have felt the need.
Yeah.
So go to their detriment, probably, right? To their detriment. Because then the pressure's on and they've not got anybody to talk about it with. So I think communication is the key, isn't it? Because when I see stuff go wrong, it's not often because of the challenge. It's often because of the way that it's, number one, thought about, or number two, communicated to others. What do you think?
Yes, and I know this one from personal experience, but I would say the same for clients, is that when we say we communicate, we do actually communicate, as in, it's not that we mention things, it's not that we just well, I did tell you, I did mention this, is that we actually sit down and really talk about it, even if you have to change environment or whatever, and it's that we actually do get under the skin of the conversation. Because I think too often my experience is, you find that, well, I was doing the washing up and I mentioned to my wife, right? Wrong time.
There's space to have a proper conversation about it.
Yes, and I think that's the big thing. And I think one of the things which I find is that once you're able to have that open conversation, so much it's so rich anyway, right? So much comes to the table, and then actually you start to really understand what matters. It's only then that you really understand what matters, right? What each of them is actually thinking and feeling about what's going on. And I think, and at that point, I think it just opens up the conversation so much more. But it then becomes a conversation like you're sitting around the kitchen table rather than a boardroom, right? So you're sitting around having a conversation about what life's like, what's happening, what's going on, more often not what's going on with the kids, right? And then the business in that context, rather than a conversation about the business solely, that then may or may not touch on what's happening in in life generally. And I think that's it. But communication is and that's one of the foundational bits and structure of communication. I think one of the things which I don't quite understand why we're not. You wouldn't run a business without meetings. You wouldn't run a business without structure. You wouldn't run right. We wouldn't talk. We might have a slightly more informal way in which sometimes we do things as a marriage and as a family, right? But when you have the two of them, I think we think it's a bit. I'm trying to think what it's kind of a bit.
To do that at home.
Yeah, it's kind of, but that's for business. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's good comms. It's good comms, right? Speaking and sitting down and having a proper conversation is good, no matter where you look at it. But it's kind of the life. It's kind of in the realm of business, and we're going to bring it into our family life, and it feels a bit dirty. And it's like, no,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like. And again, I think you can describe it as a different way. But I've got a friend who's got one daughter, same age as Sophie, and they sit down and have dinner every day. They sit down and actually have dinner every day. And it feels very, and actually I did as a kid, but it's not a habit we've continued in our house. And you look at that and you go, you know what, that's a really good environment to turn around and go, we've got 45 minutes a day where we know we're going to be together and we're not going to be looking at telly or doing, and we've got the opportunity to talk. So I think that element of communication is really important. And as you say, creating that space, regardless of how it looks in your life, to do that is vital. Now, one of the things I love most about you, Ray, is that your love of the metaphor, right? And my favourite metaphor I'm using at the minute is I've got two, right? One that's really pertinent to this conversation, and actually I wrote that in the book because every chapter I wanted to start with a little phrase that I thought was really, really pertinent. And in the financial well-being chapter of the What Happens Next book, I used a phrase that I love, which is money is a great servant but a terrible master. I think the same applies to business as well, right? I think if your business is serving you in your life, great, and it can do an amazing job for many of us. If you're the slave to your business, that might be where you need to renegotiate. But the other one that I think is really, really, really I love at the minute is the fact that most people see the retirement transition to the next chapter of their life as a cliff. They stop what they're doing and then they fall off. I like to see it as a bit more of a flight path where you experiment, you move slowly throughout the transition to a point where you've built your life by tiny experiments and testing out what works and what doesn't. I think that's a far more natural way to build the next chapter than just turning around and go, I'm going to stop, I'm going to sell my business, I'm going to retire, and then I don't know what I'm doing. I just think about why I'm doing it. If you, as the master of the metaphor, what metaphor would you use to help people think about that transition they make in their 50s, 60s and beyond?
Well, it's interesting because I was going to say about going off the edge of a cliff but you have a parachute. I think one of the things which I think this applies to so many things, whether it be communication or everything else, is I really, really like the Stephen Covey private victory part, which is seek first to understand before being understood. And that is before you start judging anything, go ask, go explore, go understand, go research, go have a look at what's possible. And then with that information, internalize it and come out, rather than what we actually do is we kind of step in, or we, as you say, nothing is immediately turn off, turn on, right? There's no. So I think we don't actually just go play. I think that's the other bit. Just go play, right? Go experiment. There's so it's and there's nothing. There's that's real fun in that. Rather than I think we kind of feel it's a bit. I don't say beneath us because it just feels like we're not serious.
I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that concept of play, we think of it being childish, and I'd argue that it's childlike but very powerful, right? I'd argue that curiosity, that sense of play, that sense of if I can do anything I want, what can I do, is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
and actually, for me, what happens next is a 10-year journey for me to work out what's next for me. And it's because I think curiosity and play is really important.
But we're so caught up in the urgent, Chris. Yeah. That's part of the thing, right? We don't. One of the conversations we've been having a lot here, and Luann's been having with me quite a bit over in recent times, is to actually slow things down.
Yeah.
Right. There is a reason why Aesop talked about the tortoise and the hare, right?
Yeah.
Because we do need to slow things down. To actually, we need to bring the bath water, take the water out of the bath a little bit, right? So we can think we need to put the train in the sidings, just so we can actually reflect and actually move forward. And I don't think we do that. I think and we're there, and we're fearful of doing that because what happens. So as we've talked before, we're fearful of it because in case it stalls, right, and we stop, right, and then everything just comes to a halt. Well, life doesn't tend to work like that unless we make it like that. But that's not what happens. But also, we don't want to speed it up in case we come off the rails and it becomes too much. So, but actually, what we need to do is, you remember the old. Oh my God! You remember the toys where it used to be out like I suppose it's like the accordion. You know, when you used to have all like little plastic pipe used to be able to, that's life, right? And I think if we looked at it in terms of there's times to speed up, there's times to slow down. If we just were able to just manage our energy and our time and everything about us in that way, I think we'd be so much not happy. We'd have we'd be able to explore more, engage more, be comfortable playing, just being more just being more ourselves.
More in flow.
More in flow, yeah, I think so. I think, and going back, it's interesting what you said earlier about the challenges between business and family and on time and how and one of the things. So I love going back to when I was a kid and thinking about all the things I did when I was a kid. Whether I was good at them or not is another matter. But do you always remember you used to stand on the space hopper?
Yeah.
And all you were doing, I think this is where one of those ones where you go, work-life balance is an absolute myth, right? It's complete nonsense, right? Because what you're doing in life is counterbalancing forever, right? You're always just reshifting your balance as to what's going on in life, right?
Well, I mean, so I always use the phrase imperfect balance because actually it's not that there's perfect balance. A perfectly balanced life depends. I mean, number one, it's fallacy, but also number two, that balance will naturally shift over time depending on what stage of life you're at. You know that definitely happens, and you're always having to re-navigate and look at your component parts. I think the other thing that I would say would be two things. Number one, that if you're going to do something, particularly as you're transitioning for your next chapter in your life, we write about it in the book actually. Working out who you need on your team is a really important thing. Now that might be somebody like you or somebody like me from a professional perspective. That would definitely, and I write about this in the book, that would definitely be the person that you share your life with. Because if you're thinking about making that transition, I'd suggest that would be person one that you might want to have a conversation about this transition with. But the one that I recommend my clients, if they're thinking about transitioning to retirement or whatever happens next, is somebody they respect and admire who's 2 to 3 years ahead on the journey.
Yes.
Because what they'll get then is an insight from that element. And often with it, like with permission, we'll introduce clients who are at different stages so that they can just experience sort of what it's like. And it's really interesting when you hear the feedback from those conversations, because there's stuff that who are on that track, people who are on that track just wouldn't mention to me in a financial planning meeting, but would mention to somebody who's ready to start. Fascinating. So find somebody you're going to do that. But also, work-life balance isn't a great analogy, because there's always the bits that we need to throw in. I also think getting to a point where we're not doing any work, like that learn, earn and rest model of retirement, that industrial age model is really, really broken, because actually we need purpose. We need something to get up in the morning for. How do we plan better for that next chapter, do you think?
So it's interesting what you said about having someone who's right. What's the old Chinese proverb? If you want to know what the journey ahead is like, ask the person who's walking back, right? And I think so. I've been doing some work recently around on the analogy of the Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the things which in business, right, this is one thing about coming from a highly successful corporate background. In business, you will always have a Knights of the Round. You would always be Arthur, and there would always be a very, very clear knight who the knights around you are. There'll be a mentor, there'll be a coach, there'll be the right kind of people to support you in your work, in your career.
Yeah, you've got a team around you, haven't you?
Right. Yeah. So why then do we not do this for us personally? Because if you're going to transition, right, you need that team around you. You need a team around you, and Arthur didn't build Camelot on his own, right? So it started with Arthur and Guinevere, right?
Yeah.
And then around Arthur and Guinevere, you have every knight who has a reason for being there, because they are the best person in the seat. They're the best person in that seat, right? So, but it's an eclectic mix of who we require, who we need around us to be able to make that transition, and we don't adopt that mindset. And it's whether that's a fear of, well, if we start talking about it, maybe I'm not ready for what I'm coming up with, what I want. Maybe what I want is I'm not able to do, whether there's not the right people around us.
Can I just share something? Because we did, when I was writing the book and when I was thinking about the next stage in terms of what happens next journey and how we are going to support people more, we got about 40 people to give us some answers to those sort of questions. Okay. What support do you need, and why, if you work with a financial planner, wouldn't you choose to get that round table for other parts of the transition? And you know what the most prominent answer was?
Go on.
I should be old enough to work it out.
Oh, and really?
Genuinely smart, intelligent people who in their business lives would get teams together, get the expertise, work with somebody like me in their personal lives, but all this life stuff, I should be able to work that out on my own. And we haven't got time today to explore that, but that's interesting, isn't it?
That is really, and that's
really I don't believe that to be the case. I believe that actually, like any massive change, and like this journey to the next chapter is a biggie, we need help. We need help.
Yes.
And it's really,
every mountain climber needs a Sherpa, and every team, every time you go up a mountain, it's not one Sherpa, it's a selection of Sherpas depending on what it is that you're trying, what you need at whatever point in the journey.
Yeah, 100%. We're coming to the end of our interview now, mate, and I've loved it. So two questions for you. Firstly, tell me a really short story that describes the positive impact you make when you work with clients. And number two, if people would like to reach out and have a conversation, where can they find you?
Okay, so probably the the best answer I can do on the what works is there's a question I've been asking myself is who buys, whether it's the husband that buys or it's the wife that buys, and it's when the wife turns around and sends a message that says, "I know when my husband is working with you, and he's working with you really well because he comes home, he's calm, and we have a great time together." And I've had that on multiple occasions, and that for me, I think, is the ultimate. That is the ultimate piece.
That's the win.
That's what matters. Yeah, and reach me. Probably LinkedIn is probably the best place. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can see some of my stuff. But otherwise, I think that's probably the best place to reach out to me. I think.
Amazing.
And check out the new website. It's really cool.
All right, yeah, we'll put a link in the comments when the video goes out. Definitely. Cheers, mate. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, Chris.
Part of the issue we've got when we're thinking about what happens next in our lives is having the self-awareness, having the introspection to be able to think about what the gaps in our well-being are. And we're doing loads of work at the minute with what happens next to build solutions that are going to help you think about well-being in a nuanced way when you're thinking about how it applies to your life. One of the first things we've built that you can use today is our What Happens Next quiz. It's free to do, takes about 5 minutes, but what it will do is give you an insight into the areas of strength when it comes to your well-being and the areas you might want to improve. You can take the What Happens Next quiz at whathappensnext.life/quiz, and I hope it helps you in your journey to work out what happens next for you.